It's 6 o'clock in the morning. The city is still asleep, but Mia is already awake. She takes a quick shower, dresses in simple dark pants, and a t-shirt with the delivery service logo. In the kitchen, she drinks tea, standing by the window, looking out onto the deserted street. Then she grabs her old backpack and heads out. She's riding the bus. At this hour, it's almost empty. Mia looks out the window and thinks. She thinks about the canvas she bought last week and hasn't yet decided what to paint on it. She thinks about the paints that need storage, and her small room doesn't have one. These thoughts are her refuge from the mundane. The office of the delivery service, betrayal, is located in the basement of an old building. Going down there is always unpleasant. The air downstairs is stale and smells of dust, old cardboard, and food from yesterday's orders. The small room is filled with desks and computers. Shift schedules and rules for couriers hang on the walls. Her manager, a Korean named Minho, sits behind a glass partition. He's about 40, has a stern face, and a habit of squinting when he looks at the computer screen. He rarely says anything pleasant. Mia signs in with her electronic pass. A short beep sounds. Minho turns to face her. "You're 6 minutes late," he says in a flat, emotionless voice. "Sorry, the bus was stuck in traffic due to road construction. I don't care about traffic. I care about time. Take the order. Urgent. Address. Downtown. Customer number 447. Tom Yum soup with shrimp and duck salad. This is an important person. No mistakes. No lateness." He hands her the printed receipt and a small yellow card marked VIP. Mia nods. She goes to the counter where the coolers are. Her shift colleague, a girl named Sophie, has already assembled the order. The soup, in a separate sealed container, is placed in an insulated bag with gel ice packs. "Take care of this one, Mia," Sophie whispers. Minho said if there are any complaints, everyone will get into trouble. "I understand," Mia quietly replies. She knows that feeling of heaviness in her stomach before an important delivery. She attaches a wide shoulder strap to her bag for added comfort. Then she pulls on her simple black windbreaker and steps outside, where her scooter awaits. An old blue model, one that has failed her many times but still works. She starts it on the third try, and the engine squeals to life. Mia puts on her helmet and sets off. She should be there in 25 minutes. The morning sun is just beginning to warm the asphalt. As she drives, images of future scenes flash through her mind. Perhaps today's cityscape, empty and gray at this early hour. The first part of the journey goes smoothly. The streets gradually fill with cars, but Mia deftly navigates them on her scooter. She's more than halfway there when she starts to get nervous. Traffic in the city center is always unpredictable. She turns onto the embankment, a shorter route. There are fewer cars here. She glances at the clock on the dashboard. She still has 10 minutes. She can make it. And suddenly the scooter jerks as if it's tripped. The engine emits a sharp, dry cough. Then the sound stops. Silence falls, broken only by the roar of the city around. The scooter loses speed and rolls toward the side of the road. Mia feels her heart begin to beat faster. She pulls the scooter over to the sidewalk, puts it on the kickstand, and tries to start it again. She presses the starter button. Only a faint clicking sound is heard. There is no response from the motor. She tries again and again, all to no avail. Panic begins to rise from somewhere deep in her stomach, in cold waves. She dismounts and inspects the scooter. Everything looks normal. There's gas. The headlights are on, but the engine is dead. She glances at her watch. 5 minutes have passed since the breakdown. She's late. She glances at the cooler bag at her feet. VIP client. Minho made that clear. A complaint from such a client is a huge deal. Possibly a reprimand, possibly a pay cut, and she needs every penny. She squats down and unzips her bag. She takes out a container of soup. It's sealed with a special film. She carefully touches the side. The container is still warm, but the warmth quickly dissipates. It's not hot. She can feel it even through the material. The soup is cooling with every second. An irrational, desperate idea occurs to her. She unzips her windbreaker and the sweatshirt underneath. Then she tucks the soup container under her clothes, right up to her stomach, and zips the windbreaker over it. The fabric presses the plastic tightly against her body. She hopes the residual heat from her skin will be enough to delay the cooling for a little while. It looks and feels ridiculous. The container presses against her ribs, preventing her from moving. She takes out her phone with trembling hands and calls Minho. The beeps seem to go on and on. "What's wrong?" She hears his sharp voice. "Minho-san, my scooter broke down in the middle of the road. I can't get there." "Where are you?" The voice gets harsher. "On the embankment, by the bridge." A heavy sigh is heard. "Wait, don't go anywhere. I'll try to send someone to pick up the order. You've ruined the whole schedule." He hangs up. Mia stands on the sidewalk, clutching the cooling soup to her under her jacket. She feels stupid and helpless. 15 minutes pass, then 20. Cars rush past. Pedestrians give her a wide berth, casting curious glances. The soup under her jacket no longer warms her. It's just a cold plastic object, absorbing her body heat. She realizes it's all over. The delivery is a bust. 2 hours later, it was all over. Another courier arrived and took the bag without even looking at it. A towing service arrived and took the scooter. Mia took a taxi to the office, which she had to pay for out of pocket. The office was tense. Minho was waiting for her, standing at his desk. His face was pale with anger. "So," he began, his quiet voice sounding more dangerous than a shout. "Congratulations! You put on quite a show. Minho-san, I—" "Shut up. Just shut up. Client 447. His orders are our #1 priority. Do you know who he is?" Mia shook her head, looking at the floor. "You don't need to know. It's enough to understand that he pays well and demands perfect service. And we sent him cold soup." "Cold!" he called, personally. His tone, it was icy. I've never heard him talk like that before. Minho runs a hand over his face. "You have one chance to make things right. He demands that you deliver a new, correct order. Now, for free. And that you apologize in person. Here's the address. Get ready." He throws the piece of paper with the address on the table. Mia takes it. Same old business district. The company name, Choi and Associates. Sounds respectable. She wordlessly walks to the counter. The cooks have already prepared a duplicate order. New tom yum soup, new salad. Everything is perfectly packaged. The soup container is so hot, it's painful to hold without a towel. She takes another taxi. This time she pays in advance from the little money she has on her. She's ashamed. Ashamed of her incompetence, of letting her colleagues down, of her panic, and of that stupid container under her jacket. The building she stops in front of is unremarkable. Medium height, gray stone, narrow windows. No flashy sign, just a small, dark plaque at the entrance with the company name. The doors are heavy glass. She steps inside. The hall is empty. There are no sofas, no plants, no reception desk, only polished granite floors and white walls. Silence. Even the sound of her footsteps echoes off the walls. She stops, unsure of where to go. Suddenly, the elevator door opens silently. A young Korean man in an impeccable dark gray suit steps out. His hair is cut short, his face completely impassive. He approaches her, and his dark eyes glide first over her face, then over the cooler bag in her hands. "You're from the delivery service," he says. It's not a question, but a statement of fact. His voice is low and even, without intonation. "Yes, for client 447. My name is Mia." "Follow me," he says, and turns toward the elevator. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't smile. He simply waited for her to step into the elevator, then pressed the button for the top floor. The elevator moved silently and quickly. The man stood, staring straight ahead at the door. He didn't look at her. Mia felt a cold knot of anxiety tighten in her chest. Everything was wrong here. It was too quiet, too empty, too cold. She felt like everything was going wrong, and there was nothing she could do about it. The elevator stops. The doors open not onto a hallway, but directly into a spacious reception area. Here, too, the furniture is minimal. A low table, a couple of modern chairs, recessed ceiling lights. Nothing superfluous. A man in a suit gestures toward a single, solid dark wood door in the wall. Inside, wait, he says, and walks toward the elevator like a soldier on guard duty. Mia takes a deep breath and pushes the heavy door. It opens silently. The office is huge and almost empty. One wall is a panoramic window, offering views of the city and the river. Light floods the room, but does nothing to make it feel cozier. Opposite the window stands a massive dark wood desk. Behind it sits a tall leather chair. On the other side of the desk is a single, simple chair for guests. On the desk sits a laptop, a stack of neatly folded papers, and a couple of pens. No books, no paintings, no photographs. Nothing that would indicate the person who works here. The man sitting at the table is Park Jin. He doesn't look at her. His attention is completely absorbed by the document in his hands. He looks older than she imagined from his voice on the phone. He's probably around 40. His features are sharp, his cheekbones high, his jawline firm. His dark hair is neatly combed. He's wearing a simple, but obviously expensive black jacket over a white shirt without a tie. On the little finger of his left hand is a wide silver ring with a dark, dull stone. Mia approaches the table and stops 2 steps away, hesitant to sit without an invitation. I brought your order, she says, her voice weak in the quiet room, to replace the damaged one. On behalf of the delivery service, I offer my deepest apologies for the inconvenience. Only then does he look up. His gaze is slow, focused. He looks at her, not with malice, but with a concentration that seems to be trying to read the fine print on her face. His eyes are dark, almost black, and there's no warmth in them. Put it down, he says, the same 2 words as last time on the phone. His voice is quiet, low, slightly accented, but perfectly clear. She places the cooler bag on the edge of the table, unzips it, and takes out a container of soup. She sets it in front of him. He puts the document aside and removes the lid of the container. Thick steam immediately rises into the air, fogging his thin silver chopsticks lying nearby. He takes them, but instead of eating, he carefully dips the tips into the soup, stirs, picks up a little broth, and brings it to his lips. He tastes it. His face doesn't change. Hot? He states. This time. He puts his chopsticks down and moves the container a couple of centimeters away from himself. The small gesture seems infinitely disdainful. Now explain, he says, folding his hands on the table. First order, cold soup. I called to report a problem. I said, the soup is cold. Nothing more. Why does your company report say that I refused to accept the order, behaved aggressively, and threw the food away? Where did this lie come from? His tone doesn't rise. It remains level, cold as steel, but every word falls on Mia like a weight. She feels the blood drain from her face. So that's it. The first courier, the one who took her bag, must have been afraid of the consequences and wrote an outright lie in his report, shifting the blame to the client. Mia stands with her eyes downcast. Her palms are clammy. She can't betray her colleague, but she can't tell the truth either. I don't know. She hears her own voice, weak and false. I just brought a replacement. I didn't see what was in the report. He's silent. Silent for so long that Mia is forced to look up at him. He's looking at her. Not through her, but straight at her. His gaze isn't that of an angry client. It's the gaze of a man accustomed to seeing lies and recognizing them immediately. There's no anger in his eyes. There's disappointment and interest? No, more like a cold, analytical assessment, as if he's studying a new, unfamiliar insect. Understood, he finally says. You may go. Stunned, Mia only nods. She wishes she could say something else, something clever, something that would salvage the situation, but the words won't come. She simply turns and practically runs for the door, feeling his gaze on her back. The ride back to the office passes in a haze of shame. The taxi feels like a cage. Mia can only think about how to quickly forget this day, but a new nightmare awaits her at the office. Minho is not alone. Next to him stands the owner of the delivery service, an older man named Mr. Lee. Both look at her grimly. Well, Minho growls. Did he accept the apology? Yes, Mia stutters. He tried the soup, said it was hot, and he let me go. Let me go? Mr. Lee asks again. His voice trembles with worry. He called again, 5 minutes after you left. He asked specifically about you, and about that first false report. He wants to know who wrote it. An icy hand squeezes Mia's heart. What? What did we do? What did we do? Minho mimics her. We have to protect our employee and ourselves. If we admit our courier lied about that client, we're screwed. We'll be sued. Our ratings will plummet. Mr. L nods, his face drawn. We've drafted an official response, he says, gesturing to the computer screen. We acknowledge that there was a delivery temperature error, but we also point out that the behavior described by the customer, refusal to accept, aggression, is not confirmed by our internal review. Understand? We apologize for the cold soup, but we imply that he may have exaggerated about his behavior. It's a move, a defensive move. Minho turns the monitor toward Mia. She sees the text of the email. It's dry and formal. At the end is the key phrase. To prevent potential future conflicts, customer account 4047 has been temporarily flagged for manual review of all subsequent orders. We recommend adding it to your watch list. Sign here, Minho says, pointing to the electronic signature field for the courier responsible for the incident. It's a formality. This way, the system will confirm you've read it. Mia looks at the screen. She understands what this means. They're deliberately going for confrontation. They're calling the client potentially problematic. His account will likely be blocked for convenience. She's disgusted by this lie, this cowardly decision. But she sees the faces of Minho and Mr. Lee. She sees the fear in their eyes. They're afraid of this man. And now she's afraid too. Her hand trembles as she picks up the computer mouse. The cursor hovers over the confirm button. She takes a deep breath and presses the left mouse button. There's a soft electronic click. It's over. Customer account 447 has been flagged. The order has been archived. The incident is considered closed. Okay, Mr. Lee sighs. Get back to work. And I hope this was a lesson for you. Mia nods and steps away from the table. She feels not relief, but heaviness, the weight of petty, cowardly lies that now rests on her conscience. She thinks of Park Jin's cold, assessing eyes. She hopes she never sees them again. She is wrong. The silence in the office after signing the report was deceptive. Mr. L sighed heavily, reached for his phone, and began dialing customer service to explain the situation in person. Minho nodded to Mia to go to her desk. She went to her small desk against the wall, where an old computer stood and a stack of route sheets lay. The rest of the day went on as usual. Orders were taken, couriers scurried back and forth, but tension hung in the air. Minho glanced nervously at his phone, as if expecting it to ring at any moment. Mr. L went into his office and didn't come out. The automated system operated without emotion. As soon as Mia's report and Minho's decision were entered into the database, the algorithm kicked in. Account number 447 received an internal flag, a red flag. A note appeared in its client file. Potentially conflicting, manual order review recommended, prepayment required. In practice, this meant that if Park Jin attempted to place a new order through the app or website, the system would first send his order to a manager for additional verification. Then, it would likely be rejected, requiring full prepayment, which was offensive to a regular VIP customer. Essentially, his account was blocked. Mia tried not to think about it. She delivered her usual orders, ate a sandwich on the go, and chatted with Sophie. It seemed the storm had passed. By evening, Mr. L emerged from his office with the air of a man who had just dropped a heavy burden. Everything is settled, he said to Minho, but loud enough for everyone in the small room to hear. We've deflected the blow. The system will protect us. The client, if they're sensible, will understand that it's not worth squabbling with the service over one oversight. They'll find another delivery service, and we'll save face and reputation. Mia felt a faint sense of relief. So it was all over. That stern man in the empty office would simply disappear from her life. She imagined him, having been rejected by the system, simply shrugging his shoulders and ordering food elsewhere. Maybe he'd even forget about the incident. People who did business in large offices probably had more important things to do. She finished her shift, handed in her report, and went home. At home, over a cup of tea, she tried to think about paints and canvases again. But her thoughts were confused. His face appeared before her eyes. Not angry, but cold, as if carved from ice. And his last look, full of silent understanding that she had lied again. She pushed these thoughts away. It was all over. The next day began normally. Mia arrived on time and received her order list. The morning passed in a flurry. She almost stopped thinking about the previous day. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, when the activity had died down a bit, a man entered the basement. He didn't ring the doorbell or knock. The door simply opened, and he appeared on the threshold. It was a young Korean man in a dark gray suit. The same assistant. He stood motionless, his arms hanging at his sides. He slowly scanned the room, his gaze sliding over the tables, the couriers chatting at the water counter, and Mia sorting through papers at her desk. His face was completely blank. The conversations in the office died down. Everyone felt the change in the atmosphere. The air seemed to thicken. Sophie, standing next to Mia, gasped softly and froze. Minho, sitting behind his partition, looked up and saw the guest. His face instantly turned white. He stood up so abruptly that his chair slid back and hit the wall. He froze, staring at the man in the suit. The assistant walked leisurely across the room to Minho's partition. His steps were silent on the linoleum floor. He stopped 2 steps away from the manager. "Manager Minho?" he asked in the same even, emotionless voice. "Yes, I'm listening," Minho's voice wavered. "My boss, Park Jin-sam, wants to speak with you. And with the courier who delivered the order yesterday. The girl, Mia." A deathly silence fell over the room. The hum of the computer's system unit could be heard. Mia felt the floor give way beneath her feet. She grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. He had come. In person. She's en route now," Minho blurted out, trying to buy time. The assistant slowly turned his head and looked straight at Mia, standing at the table 20 feet away. His gaze was like a laser beam. "She's here," he stated. "My boss is waiting in the car. You should get out, both of you, now." No pleases, no options. It was an order. Minho nodded like a puppet. He took a few hesitant steps from behind the partition, his movements stiff. He looked at Mia and gestured for her to come closer. Mia forced her legs to move. She walked across the quiet room, feeling the gazes of her colleagues on her. Sophie looked at her with panicked sympathy. The assistant turned and walked toward the exit. Minho and Mia followed him like condemned prisoners. They climbed the stairs to the street. A long black car was parked at the curb, right in front of the entrance to their shabby building. It looked out of place against the backdrop. Too expensive, too clean, too quiet. The assistant opened the back door and stood aside, waiting. Minho peered inside. His face contorted with fear, he looked helplessly at Mia, then shook his head, inviting her in first. She understood. He was afraid to sit next to this man. Mia leaned over and peered into the car. Park Jin was sitting by the far window. He was staring straight ahead, at the back of the seat in front of him. His profile was clear and motionless. He was wearing a different jacket, a dark blue one, but his appearance was the same. Impeccable, cool, detached. "Sit down," he said without turning his head. His voice came from the dim interior, quiet and clear. Mia crawled inside and sat on the edge of the seat, as far away from him as possible, right by the door. The interior smelled of leather and something cold, almost medicinal. Minho, after a moment's pause, awkwardly squeezed in after her and sat in the middle, leaving as much space between himself and Jin as possible. The door was closed by an assistant from the outside. The silence in the interior became absolute, soundproof. Jin slowly turned his head. First, he looked at Minho. Minho cringed. "Your system," Jin began, "flagged my account as problematic. Blocked it." "Park Jin-sam, it's an automatic procedure," Minho babbled. "In the event of a conflict, to protect both parties." What conflict?" Jin interrupted. His tone didn't change, but his words chilled him. "I reported the problem, cold soup. I didn't yell, I didn't insult. I stated a fact. Your employee, he nodded toward Mia, but without looking at her, brought a replacement. I accepted it. The conflict was resolved, but then I discover a lie in your report, a lie about my behavior, and as a response, a block. Explain this logic to me. Minho opened his mouth, but no words came. He licked his lips. We had to protect our employee from possible unfounded claims, he finally managed. What claims? Jin asked. I only made one. The soup was cold. That's all. You lied to create an alibi for yourself, and you punished me for it. He finally turned his gaze to Mia. She sat, staring at her hands folded in her lap. She felt his gaze on her, heavy and unforgiving. And you, he said, speaking directly to her. You lied to my face, in my office. I asked you about this report. You said, I don't know. You knew, or guessed, but you lied. Twice. Mia looked up. Her eyes met his. The salon was dark, but she could see the cold, unforgiving light burning in them. You lied about the food. And you lied about me, he continued, drawing out the words. You called me problematic, aggressive, someone who throws away food. Who do you think I am? He waited for an answer, but there was no answer, only silence pressing on his ears. Jin leaned back in his seat, his fingers tapping lightly on his knee. I can't stand two things, he said, now looking into the space between them. Negligence and lies. The first can be fixed. The second is rotten. Your company has exhibited both. Your manager offered me monetary compensation. He chuckled briefly and silently. I'm not interested. Money doesn't solve everything. It doesn't educate. It doesn't teach responsibility. He looked at Mia again. You will correct your mistake. Personally, every weekday at exactly 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you will bring me lunch. Not through the service. You personally. You personally will pick it up from the restaurant I specify. You personally will check its temperature. You personally will bring it to my office, and you will stand and wait while I try it. Every day, until I decide the lesson has been learned. Do you understand? Mia nodded, unable to speak. Her throat was tight. You! He turned to Minho. We'll make sure she has time in her schedule for this. Every day from 2 to 4. No discussion. If I find out you're interfering with this, or trying to lie again, your delivery service will close within a week. Do you understand what I mean? Minho nodded so quickly it almost seemed like a spasm. Yes, Park Jin-sam. Of course. Everything will be as you said. Okay. Jin turned to the window, signaling that the conversation was over. Tomorrow at 3, don't be late, Mia sighed. Fresh air rushed in. Mia stepped out, her legs weak. Minho rolled out after her, almost falling onto the sidewalk. The door closed. The black car pulled away silently and disappeared into the traffic. Mia and Minho stood on the sidewalk in front of their office, not looking at each other. Then Minho exhaled heavily. Did you hear that? 2 to 4, no other orders. This is your only job now. There was no sympathy in his voice, only weariness and fear. Don't let us down again. Mia lived the next day as if in a dream. She delivered morning orders automatically, her thoughts preoccupied with the upcoming events. At precisely 2 o'clock, she arrived at the designated restaurant, an expensive Korean place she would never have visited on her own. The chef, warned in advance, silently handed her a black lacquered lunchbox. It was heavy and very hot underneath. For Park Jin-sam, said the cook, and there was something in his voice between respect and apprehension. Mia got into a taxi. At 2:30, she stood outside the familiar gray building. Her heart was pounding. The assistant, like a shadow, appeared in the doorway and silently escorted her upstairs. Everything was the same as the first time, but now the ritual reeked of hopelessness. She entered the office. Jin was at his desk, this time on the phone. He spoke Korean, briefly and curtly. His tone wasn't loud, but it conveyed such unquestionable authority that Mia involuntarily froze by the door, afraid to move. On this is... No, that's not up for discussion. The price is fixed. If they don't like it, let them look for another supplier. but they know there's no other supplier. A pause. Fine. Do that. He hung up and only then looked up at Mia. He didn't apologize for keeping her waiting. He just waited. Mia walked over to the table and set down the lunchbox. Her hands trembled slightly. She opened the lid. Inside were several exquisitely decorated dishes in small compartments. There were almost no leaks. The expensive packaging held the temperature perfectly. Jin picked up his chopsticks. He didn't try everything. He chose one dish, something like beef stew, and broke off a small piece. He brought it to his mouth and chewed thoroughly. His face expressed neither pleasure nor displeasure. He simply nodded, more to himself than to her. "That's enough," he said. "You may go. Same time tomorrow." That was all. Not a word about food, not a glance lingering on her longer than necessary. He was already looking at the papers in front of him, pushing the lunchbox aside. Mia turned and walked out. In the elevator, she leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. It was a humiliating procedure. She felt less like a courier and more like a servant, allowed into the master to perform a single function and then immediately banished. The silence in the office was more oppressive than any shouting. In this silence was his complete superiority, his control, and her utter insignificance. She stepped outside. The sun was shining brightly. People were hurrying about their business, and she now had a strict schedule. Every day at 3 o'clock, she had to come to that office and stand in that oppressive silence, waiting for his nod. It was unclear how long this would last. A week? A month? Until he decided. She looked at the building, casting a long shadow. This was punishment. Slow, methodical, humiliating. And she realized she had only just begun. A week has passed, 7 days, 7 deliveries. Mia's entire world now revolved around that time between 2 and 4 in the afternoon. Mornings became a prep. She carried out her usual orders with one thought in mind: to be there by 2. She avoided long-distance addresses, took only short routes, and constantly checked her watch. She feared traffic jams, breakdowns, any unexpected events. This fear became her constant companion, dull and nagging, like a toothache. By 2 o'clock, she should have already been standing outside that very restaurant. The chef, a serious-looking man of about 50, stopped talking to her. He simply silently held out a lacquered black box. Occasionally, she caught his quick, appraising glance. He knew who this food was for, and, it seemed, he knew who Mia was, but he said nothing. At precisely 2:20, she climbed into a taxi. At first, she tried riding a scooter, but after the first day, she realized it was a risk. The weather, the traffic, the possibility of a breakdown. A taxi was more reliable, even though it ate up the lion's share of her daily earnings. She sat in the back seat, holding the box in her lap, and looked out the window, unable to see the city. She rehearsed the same thing in her mind. Get in, park, open, step back, wait, leave. Jin's office remained unchanged. It was still empty and cold. He was always busy, sitting at his computer, reviewing papers, talking on the phone. His assistant, whom she recognized as Mr. Lee, appeared and disappeared silently. No one paid any attention to Mia. She was part of the decor, a living object, fulfilling one function. The ritual was constant. She placed the box on the edge of the table, opened the lid, stepped back 2 steps, clasped her hands behind her back. Jin would approach, pick up his chopsticks, sample one, or at most 2 dishes. Nod. Sometimes he would say, "Good." More often, he would simply turn away silently, returning to his work. Then she would quietly close the box. He rarely finished his meal, and leave. The silence was the hardest. It hung in the room like a thick shroud. There was no anger in it. There was complete detachment. She wasn't a person to him, but a reminder of discipline. And with each passing day, this feeling ate deeper into her. She caught herself beginning to think the same way. She was a walking consequence, a living punishment. Her own life, her dreams of painting, had receded somewhere far away, become unreal. The reality was this office, this gaze sliding over her like a chair or a vase, and this oppressive, perfect silence. On the 8th day, something changed. When Mia arrived at the restaurant, The cook handed her not one, but two boxes. The second was slightly smaller, made of light wood. "What's this?" Mia couldn't help but ask. "Everything is ordered," the cook replied dryly and turned away. Mia drove off, holding two boxes on her lap. Her mind was racing. Guests? A business meeting? But then why two different sets? Jin's office. He was talking on the phone as usual. Mia placed both boxes on the table. She opened the first, black one, his. Then, after a moment's hesitation, she opened the second. Inside was a light meal, clear dumpling soup, spinach salad, small rice, and stewed zucchini. This was clearly not a business lunch. It was a women's set. Jin ended the conversation. He walked over to the table and looked at the two open boxes. Then he looked up at Mia. He nodded toward the chair against the wall opposite his workstation. "Move it over. Sit down. Eat." Mia froze. She didn't understand. What?" "You eat," he repeated, already looking at his food. From the second box. "I don't want you fainting from hunger on my doorstep. You always arrive pale. Eat here where I can see it. It's part of the deal." He said this in the same flat, emotionless tone he used when giving orders over the phone. There was no concern in it. It was a statement of fact and a new rule. A hungry courier is an unreliable courier. Her physical condition was now also under his control. Mia slowly pulled the heavy chair up to the table. She sat on the edge. She picked up the chopsticks that lay on a small napkin in her box. They were light bamboo, not like his thin silver ones. She took some rice. Her hands were shaking. She felt so awkward, she wanted to sink through the floor. She was eating in front of him, under his silent supervision. It was 1,000 times more humiliating than simply standing and waiting. A few more days passed. The two-lunch ritual became a regular occurrence. Mia no longer asked. She would arrive, set down the boxes, sit down, and eat. Jin did the same. They ate in silence, separated by the width of the table, like two ghosts in empty space. But now Mia had time to observe. Before, she'd stood staring at the floor or out the window behind him. Now, with her eyes down on her plate, she could sneak glances at him. He ate quickly, but not hurriedly. Every movement was precise. He was undistracted. He often ate with one hand while scrolling through documents on his tablet with the other. Sometimes his phone vibrated. His answers were short, quiet. His phrases were clipped. "Do it this way. Reject it. Reschedule it for tomorrow. Tell them I expect a response by this evening." He never raised his voice. But his quiet commands were so iron-willed that they sent shivers down your spine. He didn't look at her during these conversations. He stared out the window, at the documents, at the screen. She was invisible, and in this invisibility there was a strange permission. She began to see not just a stern boss, but the center of an entire network. Every call was a thread leading to some person, some case, some problem he was solving. He was like a dispatcher sitting at the control panel of a complex, invisible mechanism. And this mechanism worked smoothly because he demanded it. One day, finishing her meal before him, she risked looking up and met his gaze. He didn't look away. He simply stared, chewing his food, his face impassive. She immediately looked down, her heart pounding. But in that moment, she didn't see anger or condemnation in him. She saw a test, as if he were studying her too, and that was even more terrifying. One day, toward the end of the second week, a girl entered the office without knocking. She looked about 20. She had long, dark hair and fashionable, but not flashy clothes. She held a folder in her hands. She had his eyes, just as dark and attentive, but with a sparkling curiosity. "Brother, please sign these college papers," she said in Korean, then switched to English when she noticed Mia. "Oh, sorry. I didn't know you had—" She paused, looking at Mia with undisguised interest. Mia froze with chopsticks in hand, feeling even more awkward than usual. Jin didn't look up from the document he was reading. He extended his hand without looking. The girl placed the folder in front of him. "Who is this?" she asked, nodding toward Mia. Her tone was light and friendly, but it rang with confusion. Jin signed the first paper and turned the page. "My responsibility," he said briefly, still not raising his head. The girl raised her eyebrows. She looked Mia over again, this time with a different expression. Not just curiosity, but understanding. Ah, she drawled. I see. I see. She took the signed folder when he finished. Don't work too hard, she said, already heading for the door. At the threshold, she turned, took one last look at Mia, and smiled. The smile was quick, almost secret. Then she left. Jin didn't comment. He returned to his food as if nothing had happened. But the phrase, my responsibility, hung in the air. For Mia, it sounded like a death sentence. She was his burden, his obligation, something he would be responsible for until he deemed her better. There was nothing human about it. When Mia finished and was about to leave, Jin was already sitting at the computer. She quietly stood up and picked up the empty boxes to throw them away on the way out, as she always did. As she left the office, she saw the same girl. She was sitting on a chair in the reception area, leafing through a magazine, clearly waiting. Hey, the girl said quietly as Mia passed by. Mia stopped. I'm So-yeon, his sister. The girl introduced herself. She spoke good English with a slight accent. Don't mind his manners. He's always like this, granite. Mia nodded silently, unsure of what to say. My responsibility, So-yeon repeated, a sparkle flickering in her eyes. He only says that about things he considers important, about things he's taken control of. If you meant nothing to him, he would have simply forced your manager to fire you long ago. Or worse. Mia felt a chill. What do you mean? I mean, he does that when he trusts someone. Yes, it's strange like that. Through punishment, through control. He's testing. He's watching how you react. Will you endure it? Will you show character? He hates weakness, but respects perseverance, even if he himself will never admit it. So-yeon stood up. So don't give up. Go through with it. He sees everything. She gave a friendly wink and headed for the elevator, leaving Mia completely bewildered, boxes in hand. Believes. It wasn't the word Mia would have associated with herself and Jin, but her sister's words lingered in her mind. They contradicted everything she felt, but they also gave her a strange, faint hope. Maybe this wouldn't last forever. Maybe there was some meaning to this endless silence beyond humiliation. The following week, Mia made a mistake. A small one, but a mistake nonetheless. There was some construction on the street. A lane was closed. The taxi was stuck in traffic for 20 minutes. She looked at her watch, and with each passing minute, panic gripped her. She arrived at the building at 3:05. She practically ran into the office, forgetting even to knock. Jin was sitting at the table. There was no food on it, only a cup of tea. He glanced at the clock on the wall, then turned his gaze to her. Mia froze, bracing herself for anything, for the scream, for the icy fury, for the immediate, terrible consequences. She remembered his face in the car that first day. She was already mentally saying goodbye to her job, and maybe even to something more. He looked at his wristwatch, then back at the wall watch. He did it slowly, deliberately. You're 5 minutes late, he stated. His voice was calm. Sorry, there was road work, a traffic jam. Leave 15 minutes earlier tomorrow, he interrupted. He wouldn't listen to excuses. Plan ahead. Unforeseen circumstances are not an excuse, but a factor to be taken into account. Now sit down. Your food is getting cold. He pointed to a chair. A second box was already sitting next to her usual spot. His own had apparently gotten cold, so he didn't eat it. He returned to working on the computer. Mia sat up, stunned. There was no anger, no threats. There was an order. Businesslike, precise, like his phone instructions. Plan. There was a strange, almost paternal sternness to the word. He wasn't punishing her further. He was teaching her a lesson, a simple, straightforward one, and for the first time, she was spoken to not as someone at fault, but as someone who needed to learn to manage her time. It was so unexpected that she couldn't begin to eat for a long time. After that incident, Mia began to listen more attentively. Not intentionally, but her ears were now attuned to his quiet conversations. She caught snippets. He talked about supplies, logistics, and terminal control. He mentioned port names and sums that sounded astronomical to her, He talked about tax reporting of legal assets. Sometimes people would call in other languages: Japanese, Chinese, Russian. He answered briefly but confidently. One day, Mr. Lee, his assistant, brought him a folder with photographs of some warehouse. Jin looked through them, his face hardening. "Who was in charge of security?" he asked quietly. "Kim from the 3rd section. Fire him, immediately. And tell everyone, carelessness is more expensive than the most expensive system. If this happens again, I will replace everyone, from the top to the last." There was no shouting in his voice. There was absolute, unmistakable determination. Mia realized that fire from his lips sounded like a death sentence. She saw Mr. L turn pale and nod quickly. This wasn't just a boss. This was the ruler of a small, strictly organized state. A state with its own laws, its own economy, its own enemies, and its own brutal, instantaneous justice system. She sat in the very center of this state, at the same table with its leader, eating stewed vegetables. The absurdity of the situation sometimes made her head spin. One day at lunch, his personal phone rang, the one he kept separate from his work one. He looked at the screen, and his usually impassive face turned stony for a moment. A cold spark flashed in his eyes. He picked it up. "Go ahead." He listened for a long time without interrupting. His fingers tapped lightly on the table. Then he spoke in Korean, his voice quieter than usual, but each word as sharp as a blade. "This is not a request. It's disrespectful. Tell our neighbors to the north that their conditions are ridiculous. We're not children to haggle over street corners. They have until tomorrow evening to give the right answer. Otherwise, we'll take everything. No arguments." He hung up. For a few seconds, he sat motionless, staring straight ahead. The room was thick with tension, so thick you could cut it with a knife. Then he slowly turned his gaze to Mia, as if remembering her presence. There was no fear in his gaze. It was the cold, furious patience of a predator provoked. "Eat," he said simply, "before the food gets cold." She realized she had witnessed something momentous. Neighbors to the north. Competitors. Enemies. And his answer wasn't just a refusal. It was a declaration of war, a quiet, clandestine war, but a war nonetheless. And for the first time, she saw him not just as a boss, but as a man fighting for territory, power, and respect. This knowledge filled her with a new fear, more acute and more conscious. The next day, Mr. L left the office to pick up some documents. The door was left ajar. Mia was already finishing her meal, and Jin was working. Suddenly, a man burst through the door. He was large, with a red, puffy face. He smelled of alcoholic fumes. His clothes were wrinkled. He stepped into the office, his movements hesitant and aggressive. "Jin!" he croaked. "You have to pay me! Do you hear me? You've ruined everything!" Mia froze. Her instincts kicked in before her conscious thought. She didn't think. She simply jumped up from her chair and stepped forward, placing herself between the drunk man and Jin's desk. She didn't completely block him, but her body became a physical barrier. She even raised her hands as if trying to stop the intruder, though she knew he could brush her aside with a single movement. "You can't be here," she said, and her voice, to her surprise, sounded firm, although inside everything was trembling. The man froze for a moment, stunned by her appearance. He stared at her blankly. "Who are you? Get out of my way!" That second of hesitation was enough. Jin rose from the table. His movements weren't quick, but swift. He didn't run. He simply stood, took 2 steps to the side, passed Mia, and found himself next to the man. He didn't strike. He grabbed him by the lapel of his jacket and his arm, twisted it behind his back, and with one precise, powerful movement, pinned the intoxicated extortionist to the floor, pressing his face into the expensive carpet. It all happened almost silently. Only the man's heavy wheezing and the thud of his knee on the floor broke the silence. L appeared in the doorway, his face contorted with horror. "Sorry, Jin-sam, he slipped past security." "Take him away," Jin said coldly, letting the man go. "And find out how this happened. Make sure it's the last time." Mr. Lee and another security guard, who had come running at the noise, quickly escorted the protesting man out of the office. The door closed. The two of them were left in the office again. Jin straightened up, adjusted the cuff of his shirt. Then he slowly turned to Mia. She was still standing in the same place, in the same position, with her hands raised. Now she lowered them. She was trembling. She had just stepped between him and potential danger. Stupidly, uselessly, but instinctively, Jin looked at her for a long time. His usual cold, appraising gaze gave way to something else. There was surprise in it, undisguised, deep surprise. And then, something else, something heavy and thoughtful. He was looking not at the guilty courier, but at the man who had committed an unexpected, illogical act. Why? He asked finally. One question, simple and direct. Mia didn't know what to say. The truth was, she hadn't thought. She just did. I don't know, she said honestly. He was drunk. He could have... I don't know. He nodded, as if satisfied with the answer. Then his gaze softened. It didn't become warm, but part of the icy wall had disappeared. For the first time, he looked at her not as an object, but as a subject, as a person who could act unpredictably. Sit down, he said quietly. Finish your meal. And don't do that again. That's not your job. Your job is to bring lunch. And to remain vigilant on the streets. Do you understand? He spoke to her as if she were his subordinate again, but now there was a new tone to his voice. Not condescension, but acceptance? He saw her not only as a problem, but also as something potentially useful, or at least not entirely useless. A couple of days after the incident, as they were eating in silence again, Jin suddenly put down his chopsticks. He looked at his dish, spicy braised tofu with seafood. This is too spicy for midday, he said, more to himself than to her. Then he looked up. Tomorrow, order something mild, steamed fish or chicken with vegetables, and for yourself, too. Spicy food at lunch is bad for concentration. Mia nodded, too stunned to respond. He'd started talking to her about food. Something mundane, not about schedules, not about responsibilities, but about taste. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible breakthrough. It meant he'd noticed she was eating the same things he was, that he felt the need to adjust her diet because it was affecting... what? Her ability to bring him lunch? Or something else? The next day she brought steamed fish. He tasted it and nodded. Better. Keep ordering until I say otherwise. It was an order, but hidden within it was an acknowledgement of her right to choose. A tiny, microscopic amount of trust. He trusted her to convey his wishes to the cook. And it was more than just bring whatever they give you. That evening, when Jin was talking about neighbors to the north, Mia lingered as she left the building. She pretended to search her bag, then checked her phone. In reality, she was watching. The street was almost empty, but on the opposite side, in the shade of the trees, there was a car. Not black and not expensive. Old, gray, nondescript. But someone was sitting in it, behind the wheel. She could see the orange dot of a cigarette in the darkness of the car. She felt a sense of unease. It was vague, intuitive. Maybe it was just a taxi driver waiting for a customer. Maybe someone was taking a break. But something told her otherwise. It was the same car she'd briefly glimpsed a couple of days ago when she arrived. She decided not to say anything. What would she say? I saw a suspicious car? He'd laugh, or worse, take it as her attempt to curry favor. Or, conversely, he'd take it too seriously, and the consequences would be unpredictable. But she lingered. She walked slowly past her building, then turned the corner and stopped, pressed against the wall. She waited. A few minutes later, a gray car quietly pulled away and slowly drove past the spot where she had just been standing. The windows were tinted. She didn't see the driver. The car turned at the next intersection and disappeared. Mia emerged from around the corner. The anxiety hadn't gone away. It had settled inside, alongside the fear of being late and the humiliation of the daily ritual. Now she had a new anxiety, and she understood that she was somehow strangely connected, not only to herself, but also to the world centered around Park Jin. A world where threats were spoken and neutral machines lurked outside gray buildings. She was caught up in it, whether she wanted it or not. And simply leaving after the lesson was no longer so easy. She could feel it. It happened one evening, a few days after the car incident. Mia left the building later than usual. She stayed behind to discuss changes to the restaurant's order for the following day with the chef. Dusk was already deepening, tinting the gray facade with bluish hues. To her surprise, when she stepped outside, Jin stopped next to her. He followed her out, which was unusual. He never walked her out. "You're late today," he remarked, looking not at her, but at the deserted street. "Yes, I needed to confirm tomorrow's order with the chef," Mia replied, feeling slightly awkward. He was standing so close. "From now on, do it over the phone. Don't stay out here alone late." He took a step forward, as if about to say something else, or simply walk her to the corner. At that moment, two men quickly emerged from around the corner of the neighboring building. They were dressed in dark tracksuits, their faces hidden by hoods. They walked straight toward them, purposefully, without turning away. Mia felt an icy pang of alarm before she realized why. Jin had noticed them first. His expression didn't change, but his body instantly tensed, like an animal sensing danger. He gently pushed Mia behind him, with a slight movement of his shoulder. But the men were already close. They didn't draw their weapons. That wasn't their goal. One, the larger one, moved straight toward Jin, apparently counting on surprise and superior numbers. The second, smaller and more agile, darted to the side, his gaze flickering to Mia. The goal was clear: strike Jin, but do it through her. Humiliate him by showing they could touch what was close to him. Intimidate him. It was a crude, primitive display of force from those very neighbors to the north. It all happened in seconds. The large man raised his fist. Jin seemed to have already assessed the trajectory and prepared to parry the blow. The spinning man lunged sharply toward Mia, intending to grab her arm or push her, distracting Jin completely. Mia's survival instinct screamed at her, "Run! Hit the ground, roll, run wherever her feet led." But her feet felt rooted to the asphalt. She saw the fidgety man reaching for her, his face twisted in a wicked grin. She saw the larger man swinging at Jin, and there was no room for fear in her mind. There was only sudden, clear anger. Anger at this injustice, at this rudeness, at the fact that once again, even here on the street, she was being treated simply as an object to be pushed around to annoy someone else. She didn't think. She acted. The heavy, thick plastic cooler still hung over her shoulder. It was empty, but it felt weighty. Mia yanked it off her shoulder, grabbed the strap, and with all her strength, exhaling briefly, swung it back and hit the fidgeting man's hand, which was reaching for her. The blow landed on his wrist. There was a dull thud, and the man cried out in surprise and pain, reeling back. His attack had been thwarted. He paused for a second, shaking his injured hand, his attention completely focused on the enraged girl with the bag. That second was enough. Jin, who had already begun to move to parry the first attacker's blow, saw the opportunity. He didn't block the fist. He ducked sharply, and the fist flew over his head. At the same time, he delivered a short, crushing blow with the edge of his palm to the large man's solar plexus. The man gasped, out of breath, and doubled over. Jin, without stopping, delivered a swift grab and push, sending him crashing to the pavement. The agile man, having recovered, rushed forward again, but now his target was Mia. He wanted revenge. Jin was already there, his movements quick and economical. He deftly parried a clumsy blow, caught the man's arm, twisted it, and pushed him sharply toward the first man, who was trying to rise. They both rolled across the asphalt. "Inside! Quickly!" His voice sounded next to Mia, sharp and commanding. He didn't look at the men lying on the ground. He grabbed Mia by the elbow and practically pushed her back into the building. The door slammed behind them. Mr. L stood in the hall with two guards, their faces pale. "Sort this out," Jin snapped at them without stopping. He led Mia to the elevator. The office was quiet. Mia stood in the middle of the room, shaking. Now that the adrenaline was wearing off, a wave of shock washed over her. Her hands were shaking, her knees felt weak. She looked at herself. There was a long, shallow scratch on her left arm above the elbow. Probably from her bag's belt buckle or something else in the crush. It was bleeding, leaving thin red streaks on her skin. Jin walked over to the built-in cabinet and opened it. Inside, among the papers, was a small first aid kit. He took it out and approached Mia. "Give me your hand," he said. She silently extended her hand to him. He took it with a light but confident motion. His fingers were warm and dry. He dabbed the cut with antiseptic from a disposable wipe. She hissed, and Mia flinched, but didn't pull her hand away. He moved quickly and carefully without wasting any time. Then he applied a small bandage. "That's all," he said, releasing her hand. He took the medicine cabinet back and closed the cabinet. Then he walked over to the table, but didn't sit. He stood, looking at her. The silence that fell in the room was completely different. It wasn't awkward like before. It was heavy, thick, saturated with what had just happened outside. It was filled with unspoken questions and the recognition that something had irrevocably changed between them. "Why?" he asked finally. His voice was quiet, without its previous icy detachment. "Why didn't you run? You could have been seriously injured. Your job was to get out of harm's way." Mia turned to face him. She was still shaking, but something hardened inside her. She looked him straight in the eyes. "I didn't know it was my job," she said honestly. I hate injustice. When two people fight one, when they attack from behind. And it was partly my fault. I attracted attention. I lingered near the building, noticed that car, but said nothing. I thought it was none of my business. And because of that, they knew where and when to expect me. She said it all in one breath, and for the first time in weeks, there was no fear or servility in her voice. There was weariness and bitterness. She acknowledged her mistake, not the lie in the report, but the silence, which could have been costly. Jin listened without interrupting. His face remained inscrutable, but something was changing in his eyes. "What car?" he asked. "The gray old one. It was parked opposite for several days. I saw a person in it. It wasn't here today, but they came." He nodded slowly, as if piecing together a puzzle. "It's not your fault," he said firmly. "This is my war, my differences, my consequences." He paused, choosing his words. "You showed unnecessary bravery today. Foolish. You shouldn't have interfered. It could have ended badly for you." But there was no reproach in his words. There was something else. Almost respect? No, that was too strong a word. Acknowledgement. Acknowledgement that she hadn't acted according to the norm. Not like a victim. Not like a frightened courier. She had acted, albeit rashly, but she had acted. "You distracted one of them," he added. And it was a statement of fact, but there was weight to it. "It gave me time." He walked to the window and looked out into the darkness. "They wanted to intimidate you today, to show they could reach you. They miscalculated." He turned to her. "You won't be touched again. I guarantee that. Mr. L will take you home today, and he'll pick you up and take you home tomorrow too, until the situation calms down." The next day, Mia arrived at the building as usual, but Mr. L accompanied her in a separate car. Jin was waiting for her in the office. There was no food on the table, only 2 glasses of water. Mia paused at the threshold, waiting for the usual ritual, but Jin pointed to a chair. "Sit down." She sat down. He remained standing, leaning against the edge of the table. "Your lesson, as you probably perceived it, is over," he said bluntly. "Your debt is paid, more than paid. You have fulfilled the terms. You have demonstrated punctuality, diligence, and unexpected fortitude." He paused briefly. "Your old delivery services system will be unblocked. I'll speak with your manager. There are no further obligations on your part. You are free from these daily visits." Mia listened, and something inside her sank. Not relief, as she'd expected, but a strange emptiness. This had become her routine, her strange, twisted anchor in life, and now it was gone. "I understand," she said quietly. "You don't need to bring anything today. Mr. L will drive you to the office. You can return to your normal work." He spoke in a businesslike tone, without emotion. Chapter closed. The incident is closed. The first days of returning to normal life were strange. Mia was once again delivering orders on her scooter. enduring scolding from Minho, who now looked at her with obsequious fear, and interacting with Sophie. But everything seemed somehow flat, insignificant. The danger and tension of the past weeks had created a distorted sense of reality, and the ordinary paled in comparison. She caught herself reaching for her phone at 3 in the afternoon to check the time. She avoided that same Korean restaurant. She looked at the gray buildings in the business district and felt a slight tightening in her chest. She thought about his words. Stupid courage. She thought about how he treated her cut, about the empty office and the oppressive silence, which now seemed almost nostalgic. A week passed. She was just finishing her shift, packing her bag, when Mr. L appeared in the office. He caught her eye and approached. "Miss Mia, the boss asked me to give you something." "For me?" Mia asked, surprised. "He's asking if you'd like to consider official employment. He has several legitimate businesses, office centers, cafes, a small logistics company. He's looking for a supply and delivery coordinator, organizing lunches for employees, overseeing food deliveries, working with suppliers. Work in the central office. Salary is 1.5 times higher than your current salary, with benefits." Mr. L spoke dryly, as if rehearsing a speech. "The boss says you've demonstrated the ability to manage your time and keep your cool in a critical situation. He considers these qualities valuable." Mia stood there, unable to believe her ears. This wasn't just a job offer. It was recognition. Recognition of her not as a punished offender, but as someone capable of something more. It was a bridge from that strange, dangerous world to a normal, stable life, but a bridge that still led to the same person. "Why?" she asked. "Why him? Why me and Mr. L?" allowed himself a barely perceptible smile. "The boss isn't used to explaining his decisions. He states the facts. The fact is, he needs you for this position. You're being given time to think it over. Here's the address and time for the interview if you decide to go." He handed her a plain white envelope. "Goodbye." He nodded and left. Mia held an envelope in her hands. Inside was a piece of paper with an address. A familiar address. A gray building. And the time. Tomorrow. 11 o'clock in the morning. The next morning, Mia stood in front of the same gray building. But this time, everything was different. She was wearing clean, neat clothes, not a courier's uniform. In her hands, she held a small portfolio containing the resume she'd compiled overnight, and a folder containing certificates from a computer course she'd once, for some reason, completed. She felt no fear, but a concentrated tension, like before an exam. She wasn't walking as a punishment. She was walking as a candidate, as someone with a choice. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and pushed open the heavy glass door. Mr. Lee was already waiting for her in the lobby. He nodded silently and led her to the elevator. The lift to the top floor, the reception area, everything the same, and yet everything completely different. Mr. L walked up to the office door, knocked, opened it, and let Mia go first. Park Jin was sitting at his desk. He was wearing a formal dark jacket. Some papers lay in front of him. He looked up when she entered. Their gazes met. There was no icy judgment or condescension in his eyes. There was a businesslike, attentive interest. He nodded slightly, as if acknowledging her presence. As if to say, "Well, shall we begin?" Mia stepped forward into the office. She didn't look down. She nodded back at him, quietly but confidently. Her journey here had been long and strange, full of mistakes, lies, fear, and unexpected courage. But now she was here by choice. The door closed softly behind her.